Welcome to this Whole Life Action Hour. I'm Ocean Robbins, your host. I'm thrilled to be here with you and with Hana Kahleova, who we're going to be hearing from momentarily as we dive deep into metabolism. So a little bit of context about that. Metabolism is the process by which your body changes food and drink into energy. And during this process, calories are mixed with oxygen to make the energy that your body needs. Even at rest, your body needs energy for everything that it does. Now, some metabolisms burn hotter and others cooler. Getting your metabolism optimized can impact your weight, your blood sugar regulation, your insulin function, your exercise, energy levels, caloric needs, and so much more. So today we're going to be joined by Dr. Hana Kahleova, MD, PhD, to look at ways to optimize your metabolism and support healthy weight management. Now, before I go any further, let me just say that this is coaching. We're sharing our best insights. This is not medical advice. So please, as in all things, consult with a qualified healthcare professional regarding your specific medical issues and needs. That said, you're going to learn a lot today. And today's event is a project of Whole Life Club, Food Revolution Network's ongoing membership community. And some of the questions that I will be bringing to this interview come from our Whole Life Club members. Now, Dr. Hana Kahleova, MD, PhD, is the Director of Clinical Research at the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, and she directs research studies that analyze the effect that food choices have on insulin resistance and the regulation of healthy body weight. Her favorite research topics include testing the effect of a plant-based diet on metabolism and insulin function and fitness and mental health, as well as studying the impacts of meal timing and meal frequency on metabolism and body weight. She is the author of Vegetarian Diet in the Treatment of Diabetes, and she wrote the chapter about using a plant-based diet to treat diabetes in vegetarian and plant-based diets in health and disease prevention. Hana, so great to be with you.
Thanks so much for this invitation, Ocean.
Absolutely. So tell us a little bit, Hana, about just at a really high level, like what is metabolism and how does it work?
That's such an important question. There are so many people who come to me and they say, Dr. Kahleova, like when I was in my 20s, I was able to eat anything I wanted without gaining weight. Now that I'm in my 50s and, pushing the 60s, I seem to be gaining weight from just breathing air. And that struggle is real for many people. So what is metabolism? Well, when you go solar, when you purchase your solar panels for the environment, you're getting all the sun exposure, and the solar panels are converting the solar energy into electricity that you can use in your house. You can just plug in your laptop or your phone, and you can use that kind of energy, on your devices. And so the same thing applies to our metabolism. We eat all the food, and our body just needs to process it and make sure that we can use the energy that's in the food in our cells, that our cells can do all the metabolic cooking, can just use the energy from the foods and use it for the metabolic processes, for breaking down the nutrients, building something new, breaking down the proteins that we eat, breaking them into the building blocks, that's the amino acids, building new protein. And we need protein, for so many things, like the enzymes in our body, the enzymatic antioxidants that keep us from being damaged from oxidative stress, for all the metabolic processes. So these are just simple examples of how metabolism works. Now, we get in trouble if we get an overload, if we get too many nutrients in and there's not that much output. Then we get in trouble, because what should our body do with all the extra energy? We can store some, like all the nice packs under your skin. That's the stored energy. That's the adipose tissue storing the extra energy. But you only have a certain capacity how to store the extra energy in the form of fat. Once you exceed this capacity, the fat starts overflowing to your inner organs, such as the liver and the muscle and the heart and the pancreas. And what happens then? Well, the fat doesn't belong in your heart, So if you get too much fat in your liver and in your heart and in your pancreas and in your muscle, that causes metabolic disturbances. And that's called insulin resistance. It basically jams the lock on the door where insulin is the gentleman who opens the door for glucose to come into the cells and give the energy to the cells. And now the door lock is jammed because there's so much fat stored inside. It's disturbing this healthy metabolism. And now the cells are not getting enough energy, enough glucose, and the extra glucose is building in the bloodstream. And then you are diagnosed with prediabetes or diabetes. And many people think, well, it's because you ate too much sugar. No, it's actually because you ate too much fat. And the extra fat that's being deposited in your inner organs, that needs to be get rid of. We need to get rid of it. And how do we get rid of it? A plant-based diet. A low-fat plant-based diet is the most effective way how to burn the extra fat that's stored inside the liver and in the muscle and get the metabolism going.
So are you saying that when we decrease the amount of fat that is stored in the liver, in the heart, in the organs, in places it shouldn't be, that we're not just, I get that reduces insulin resistance and enables insulin to do its job better so that fat or sugar that's in the blood can reach the muscles and do its job. But are you saying that metabolism is also about the body's furnace,
Yes.
right? So how does that weigh in? Are you saying that when insulin is able to do its job effectively, metabolic rate increases, that the body burns more in its sleep, so to speak?
Yeah, this is a fascinating question because many people think about diet and weight management only in terms of the amount of calories they're eating. And this is just like oversimplified, it doesn't work that way. Like, let's say you eat the same amount of calories from plant foods and from a diet that contains meat. The effects will not be the same because of the thermic effect of food, which is the energy that's released in the form of heat once we eat a meal. Especially in the winter time, you eat a meal and you immediately feel the warmth because there's the energy that's released in the form of heat. And wouldn't that be wonderful to eat anything you wanted and just burn the extra calories in the form of heat and just get rid of it? And guess what? You're on to something because we did a research study with 244 people who were overweight. They were in their 50s and 60s. Their metabolism has slowed down and they were like, I don't know if anything will work for me. My metabolism is so slow. We put them on a low-fat vegan diet for 16 weeks. It was a randomized clinical trial, so we also had a control group who stayed on their usual diet for 16 weeks. And we measured their metabolism at baseline and after 16 weeks using a method that's called indirect calorimetry. Now, that's a machine that looks like a spaceship. We place like a clear hood over your head and you breathe normally for 15 minutes and we measure the carbon dioxide that you're breathing out. And based on that, we're able to calculate how many calories you're burning at that moment. We measured that at baseline in the fasting state and also after a standard meal. And what we found out was really fascinating and super cool. When people switched to a low-fat vegan diet, they were losing weight. They were losing about a pound a week. But why were they losing weight? There were no calorie limits, no energy limits. People were able to eat anything they wanted without, any restrictions. They didn't count any calories. So why did they lose weight on such a diet, where they felt satiated all the time? How is it possible? Well, people were actually burning more calories. The thermic effect of food increased by 14%. That means that you can potentially eat 14% more calories without gaining weight. Or if you eat about the same amount of food, then you will be losing weight because all of a sudden your body will be able to get rid of the 14%. So imagine what it can do over the course of a year and over the course of a few decades of your life. Like, this is huge for weight management. So it's not only about how many calories you're eating, but also what kind of foods you're eating, because some of the foods will help boost your metabolism, and that's the foods that are on the low-fat vegan diet.
I'm thinking that there's a positive feedback loop here too. It seems like if somebody is reducing the body fat in around their vital organs and that they're carrying around everywhere, then their metabolism is going to get faster, as you're saying, which in turn is going to reduce their body fat.
Exactly.
Right? So, and then their metabolism gets a little faster, more like maybe how a lot of us felt when we were younger.
Yeah.
Yeah, fascinating.
And
okay.
We went one step further and we asked which foods are the most responsible for the weight loss in this particular study. Is it the foods that you don't eat, that you avoid on a vegan diet? Or is it the foods that you eat more of when you switch to a vegan diet? And we found that it's both. The number one predictor of weight loss was not eating any meat. No meat, no chicken, no fish. That was the number one predictor of weight loss. So if someone is listening who, would like to lose some weight and they're not completely clear on where to start, this would be step number one. Get rid of all the meat in your diet, including poultry and fish. Predictor of weight loss number two was eating beans. All the legumes, lentils, peas, and beans, eating as much as you can. That was predictor number two. And part of the explanation is that the consumption of legumes, of beans and peas and lentils is just so low on a standard American diet that once people go vegan, it kind of forces them to explore this food group and increase their intake of beans. And that was like, people were losing weight proportionately to increasing their bean intake. So in summary, it's both avoiding the junk on a vegan diet, and it's also about what you're eating. We like to emphasize the whole food plant-based diet that consists of fruits and vegetables and whole grains and legumes. And it seems like increasing your bean intake will just give you some extra benefits in terms of weight management.
Fascinating. So what is it? You said that meat and fish and eggs and dairy products were the number one risk factor for excess weight in your study. What is it, do you think, based on the research we have available today, about those particular products that is having that impact?
That's a great question. And it turns out there are several risk factors, that there's not only one. Number one is that all these animal foods are rich in saturated fat. So fat in general is the most caloric dense nutrient. 1 gram of fat contains 9 calories compared with carbohydrates and protein that contain only 4 calories. And it's saturated fat that's metabolically most dangerous. So if you go a little bit over your ideal caloric intake, which is easy nowadays, all this saturated fat will be just deposited as extra fat in your inner organs, in your liver and muscle and pancreas and the heart. And this is exactly what you don't want. So the saturated fat is the risk factor number one. Another independent risk factor is animal protein itself. Animal protein has a different composition compared with plant protein and is a risk factor for putting on extra weight. Another risk factor is heme iron, especially in red meat, that increases the risk of cardiovascular disease and diabetes. So it's the risky components in the meats, but it's also the deficiency of the beneficial components. There is no fiber in meat. We completely rely on plants for our fiber intake. So if you're consuming meat, you're not consuming any fiber. And fiber deficiency is one of the most important public health problems in the United States. The average fiber consumption is about 15 grams per day, which is only half of the recommended value. And so what's the number one nutritional recommendation? Eat more fiber, eat more plants. And you're not gonna get there if you eat meat. Like, obviously,
Yeah.
You're taking up the space where you could eat something more beneficial. So it's the harmful components in the animal products, but also it's the deficiency of the beneficial ones, such as fiber, antioxidants, and other phytonutrients.
A lot of people do not realize that there's no fiber in any animal products. They think that gristle in meat is fiber. It's not. So just to be super clear, there is no fiber in any animal products. There's no fiber in bottled oils either, by the way. And there's very little fiber in sugar or white flour. Where fiber is found is in whole plant foods, and it's found in all of them.
Yeah.
So, just to add a little context to what you're saying, of course, there's different kinds of fiber, and we need all of them in different ways. They're all beneficial, and they turn out to be critical to clearing us out and helping our microbiomes to be healthy, which are also a critical player in weight management. Can you speak a little bit to that? How does the microbiome and digestive health affect metabolism?
Yeah, this is a fascinating area of research. It's been shown that people who eat a predominantly plant-based diet have a more diverse gut microbiome. That means they have more kinds of bacteria that live in their gut, which makes the gut microbiome more resilient. If there's a disaster coming that just kills off a bunch of bacteria, there's all kinds of bacteria that can just compensate for the loss. So that's always a good thing, to have a large diversity in your gut microbiome. And it turns out that plant-based diets really promote the diversity. Now, I mentioned the study where our participants were losing weight and the low-fat vegan diet boosted their metabolism and they were burning more calories. We were looking also at their gut microbiome composition. And there's one particular bacteria, first of all, plant-based nutrition with all the fiber content will feed the bacteria that feed on fiber, and produce the short-chain fatty acids, which have many metabolic effects. They promote weight loss, they improve body composition, they're healthy for your heart, they also promote your immune function, they increase your insulin sensitivity, they have anti-cancer effects. There's just like so much, that goes into short-chain fatty acids. So you'd like to have as many bacteria that produce these as possible. And there's one bacteria in specifically that produces short-chain fatty acids, which is deficient in people with diabetes. It's called Faecalibacterium prausnitzii. It's a complicated name, but it's kind of a cute bacteria. And people with diabetes are super low in this Faecalibacterium prausnitzii. And this low count of this bacterium is also associated with increased insulin resistance and increased inflammation. Now, what we found in our study is that after 16 weeks of a low-fat vegan diet, this bacterium, this Faecalibacterium prausnitzii, increased, which was also associated with weight loss, improved body composition, and improved insulin sensitivity. So our gut microbiome is just mind-blowing. There's this one tiny bacteria that can make all the difference in the world. And of course, this is just a snapshot, Of course, we're talking about thousands of bacteria changing. We have more gut bacteria than we have cells in our body. It's just mind-blowing. So the food that you eat has profound effects on your gut microbiome and through your gut bacteria on your metabolism.
Absolutely fascinating. So, of course, a lot of people are going to hear that and they'll think, okay, can I take that bacteria? Is there any probiotic supplement that sells it, or do you just have to nurture it by eating the right foods?
Yeah, even if you were able to isolate the bacteria and just eat it, then your stomach would destroy most of the bacteria. The acid in your stomach is just so powerful. But let's say you would find a way, you would find a capsule that's just acid resistant and you would somehow deliver it into your gut. So you eat all the healthy bacteria, but guess what? You eat a steak afterwards and that promotes the growth of different kinds of bacteria. So the bacteria in your gut reflect the conditions you give them, the food you give them. If you wanna grow plants, you need the right seeds, right? And so if you're using the wrong kind of seeds, you will just get different plants. So the same with our gut bacteria. It's more, it's not only about delivering them to your gut. It's also nurturing the environment, giving them the right kind of environment where they will thrive.
Yeah, thank you. Let's talk a little bit about meal timing. A lot of people are talking about intermittent fasting these days, say reducing your feeding window so the stomach has some time off. Other people practice extended water fasts. Does any of this matter other than from a pure calories in, calories out standpoint, or does meal timing matter, and is it helpful to take some breaks?
Yeah, this is such a fascinating question. Intermittent fasting has been shown beneficial for weight management and for the prevention and treatment of diabetes and cardiovascular disease and even cancer. And the effects are beyond caloric intake. So it's not only about eating less calories, it's much more. Let me give you an example. If you eat the same meal in the morning and in the evening, the metabolic effects will not be the same because the hormones in your body, the levels will change, and you will deposit more fat from the evening meal even though it's the same meal as eaten in the morning. But you will just deposit more fat after the evening meal. So meal timing really plays a role. If you can shift your caloric intake into earlier in the day, then it's definitely beneficial. And one of the cutting edge concepts right now is the early time restricted eating, where you limit your eating window. It turns out, how long should the eating window be? There's a linear relationship between your body weight and the eating window. So if you don't limit your caloric intake at this point at all, then starting with 12 hours would be a good start. Let's say you start at 7 a.m. with breakfast, then finishing at 7 p.m. With dinner would be a good start. And then gradually you can narrow down the eating window. Let's say you still start your breakfast at 7, and now you shift your dinner to 5 p.m. So your eating window is only 10 hours now. Now the next step would be you eat your breakfast at 7, your lunch at noon or so, and then you have an apple at 3 p.m. and you're done eating. Now you narrow down the eating window to 8 hours. And for the best benefits, it turns out that the eating window, if you can narrow it down to 6 hours, that gives you the most benefits for weight management and for body composition. So for example, you would have breakfast at 7 and your lunch at 1, and you're done eating. And now if you're listening, you're like, oh, I would be starving in the evening. Well, maybe for a few days. But my patients with type 2 diabetes were able to do it. So you can do it for sure. It was amazing. We did a study where we took people with type 2 diabetes and we told them exactly this. Would you like to try 2 meals a day, breakfast and lunch, for 12 weeks? And for another 12 weeks, you will be eating 6 meals a day. And most of the people were like, sign me up only for 6 meals. Like, I can do it. And we were like, no, this is a crossover. You need to do both, in a random order for 12 weeks, one, and then the opposite diet for another 12 weeks. And so hesitantly, people were signing up and they were like, but doc, I don't know if I can do the 2 meals a day. I'll be starving. And what's funny, people reported being less hungry on 2 meals a day than 6. So at the end of the study, most of our study participants said, I'm doing this for life. Like, this is amazing. This is just working for me. Finally, I don't feel hungry. Because, you only eat 2 times a day, but you can get full. You can get satiated. Whereas if you eat 6 small meals a day, it's challenging because, to keep the right caloric intake so that you would be losing weight, it's much more challenging because you need to limit the amount of food, and you never get satiated. And if you just make the meals bigger, then with 6 meals a day, you go over your caloric intake and you start gaining weight. That's what we see in our culture.
So with intermittent fasting and a feeding window, does any calorie count as being outside of that? If somebody has snacks on a piece of celery at 5 p.m., is that their new end of time, even if that's all they eat after 1? Or does a little bit not count much? What about drinking a beverage that's got a dash of juice in it, or where do you draw the line?
That's exactly a perfect question. So if you want to get all the benefits of intermittent fasting, then just cutting off all the caloric intake after the end of the eating window will give you the most benefits. If you can keep the caloric intake in the evening like super small, then and keep the dinner like super light, have a salad instead of like a whole dish, then it'll be much better compared with the previous experience. There's like a whole spectrum. If you'd like to go all in and do just 2 meals a day, breakfast and lunch, you will be amazed how rested you will feel in the morning. The quality of your sleep will be just something that will keep you going. When I started doing this, I was just like blown away. And each time, when I'm traveling and changing time zones, and it's like it takes you a little bit to adjust to the new time, I'm always sticking to 2 meals a day because I found out it helps me adapt to the new time much faster. So let's say I'm going back home to Prague for the holidays, and Prague is 6 hours ahead. I'm leaving at night. And of course, I'm not eating any dinner because, it'll be night or early morning in Prague, like 2 a.m. when I'll be departing. So I'm adapting my current time when I'm departing to the actual time I'm trying to adapt to. So I'm not eating anything when I'm departing, and I will have a big breakfast when I arrive in Europe, and then have lunch, and be really strict about not eating anything in the evening, even though your body feels like, oh wait, like it's time for lunch, although it's 6 p.m. Your body will feel like I like to have something. But no, you need to be really intentional about this. And if you do this, like the time change is so fast with this type of eating. So when it helps you adapt to the traveling schedule and changing the time zones, imagine what it can do to align your body clock with the circadian rhythms. It's the same principle.
Do you ever have lunch and dinner instead of breakfast and lunch? I know a lot of folks who don't feel hungry in the morning and their appetite kicks in later. I hear you saying that calories are more rapidly metabolized early in the day than late. But for those folks who they have a natural eating window that's more like lunch at noon and dinner at 6, what do you think about that approach?
Yeah, that's called a late time-restricted eating. So that would be having lunch and dinner instead of breakfast and lunch. And both have been compared head-to-head in a recent study. And compared to not limiting your eating window at all, both of them will bring you benefits. But the early time-restricted eating will give you more benefits in terms of weight management, insulin sensitivity, fighting oxidative stress, all these metabolic aspects. The early time-restricted eating just brings you more benefits. But if you are wondering, could late time-restricted eating bring me any benefits? Absolutely. It would, compared to not restricting your time window at all.
In addition to diet, what are some of the other most potent lifestyle factors that have been shown to be helpful for people looking to lose weight, or for that matter, looking to gain healthy weight?
Yeah. That's a great question. It's not only about nutrition, right? It's not only about taking the energy in. It's also about how we burn energy. So we're talking about exercise. It turns out that also timing of the exercise plays a role. So let's say if you're a person with diabetes and you want to control your blood sugar better, then walks after each meal will help you bring the blood sugar really down. If you're someone who'd like to boost your metabolism and lose some extra weight, then exercising in the morning before you eat breakfast would give you some extra benefits, especially if you're fasting from lunch the previous day. Then you're kind of pushing your body to burn fat even more efficiently in the fasting state before you eat breakfast and switch to carbohydrates. That's called metabolic flexibility, our ability to switch from fat as the main source of fuel when we're fasting to carbohydrate once we eat a meal. So exercise definitely gives you great metabolic benefits for your weight management. Another factor is sleep. One study has been just published in Diabetologia that people who live in the cities with extra light exposure at night have a 29% higher risk of developing diabetes in their life, compared with people living in rural areas where the light pollution is not so great at night. So having a good wake-sleep cycle, having a good sleep hygiene with, sleeping at complete darkness. You can use a mask or you can use good curtains. All these are important factors that affect our body weight.
Fascinating. Thank you. Heather asked a question that is on quite a few people's minds, actually, which is suggestions for plant foods to help increase weight in underweight people.
That's a fascinating question too. So it would be kind of the opposite of what we just mentioned. If we're recommending a super low-fat vegan diet for people to lose weight, if you're trying to gain weight, what I would like to caution against is eating all the junk food that you can think of, because even though you may be skinny on the outside, many people will deposit the extra fat and just store it on the inside. So like the basic rules about healthy eating still apply to you. So don't eat all the junk you can find. That's number one. Number two, when you're trying to put on weight on a vegan diet, the most calorically dense foods will be nuts and nut butters. So you can be more liberal with those than people who are trying to lose weight, which is a good thing. You can also pack more calories, like if you use a blender, if you're making a smoothie, then you can consume more calories when you drink a smoothie in a shorter period of time. So you can incorporate some of the calorically dense smoothies in your diet. So you can be more liberal with the fat content in your diet, but be still careful about the fat quality. Avoid all the saturated fat, because even though you may not be gaining weight, the saturated fat may be deposited in your liver and in your muscle, and that's what you don't want. So the quality of the fat is vitally important.
Got it. Thank you. And then I think another thing that's worth mentioning is that by mass, muscles are actually quite a bit heavier than fat tissue, right? And they're really the kind of weight that you probably most want to add, because they're giving you more strength, right? So that's another thing to consider. Interestingly, though, muscles also burn more calories at rest than fat tissue does, right? So metabolism-wise, muscles are going to crank out more. It seems like for somebody who's wanting to gain weight, the top principles are going to be to do strength building exercise. So, you want to do the things that build muscle tissue, working out with weights, for example, rather than just hiking and running, which are going to tend to be more weight reducing activities. And then, of course, you want to eat more calories, healthy calories, as we're hearing, not just any old calories, but healthy ones. And I do think there's a way that a lot of bodies get set in a particular weight. And so some people actually, who are chronically thin or feel underweight, may actually not have a lot of appetite. And to some extent, I think that's a learned behavior, that sometimes I've seen people who it's like a furnace got turned on, they get their appetite going and suddenly they want a lot more food, but they have to get in the habit of eating, sort of leaning into eating more often on a regular basis, just the way that somebody who is trying to lose weight has to actually create a pattern of eating less often and eating more deliberately. And of course, we didn't talk about snacks exactly, but those are where a lot of the calories, snacks and drinks are where a lot of the hidden calories come in, which can cut both ways. If you're trying to gain weight, eat more often, you know, and definitely drinking some of those calories is a great way to add to your overall caloric intake with smoothies and so forth. But, you know, you don't need Coke. You know, we don't need sugar. No, that doesn't really help anybody, because it's the wrong kind of weight. Many years back, I wanted to, I'd always been really skinny, and I was like, I wonder what it would be like to have a beer belly. So I decided to have an experiment, and for a few months, I drank 1 beer a night, and I started to get a beer belly, and I wasn't gaining any weight anywhere else, just around the middle of my belly. And I was like, careful what you ask for. So cut that out. No more beers for Ocean.
That's funny that you say that. You know, now you have a proof of concept for yourself, and you know exactly what it would do. But imagine someone who just drinks a beer a day and they don't even realize, you know, the power of habit and the power it has over our health.
Yeah. Elizabeth said, can you speak to diet, metabolism, and perimenopause and menopause hormonal changes? What can one do to avoid the menopausal middle?
This is a fascinating question. And in fact, we just published a study on this topic. We took people who went through menopause and had postmenopausal hot flashes. And many people think, well, postmenopausal hot flashes, they're just annoying, which is true. They sometimes wake you up at night also, but they're also a proxy for an increased risk of diabetes and cardiovascular disease. And now, what can you do about this condition? So we put these women on a low-fat vegan diet that contained half a cup of cooked soybeans every day for the isoflavones. And the results were just astounding. These women were losing weight, about 1 pound a week, those who were overweight, and their hot flashes were reduced by 88%, which is just like mind-blowing. And they were also rating the severity of the hot flashes into severe, mild, or moderate. And what we found is that it was the moderate and severe hot flashes that were reduced the most. In other words, it was the hot flashes that were waking up these women at night, you know, that we cut out on the vegan diet. And so now the quality of life was significantly improved. Many of the women were completely free of hot flashes. But even the women who were not, their quality of life improved significantly, because now the hot flashes would come but would be just mild instead of like really severe, where it would impact the way of living. So this is just fresh off the press, a study for all women out there who are going through menopause and you know, need to deal with all these symptoms such as weight gain and hot flashes and all the changes in your body. There's something special about the low-fat vegan diet, especially if you add soy foods. Half a cup of cooked soybeans every day would give you all the isoflavones that you need.
Thank you. Somewhat relatedly, Tracy said, people say your metabolism slows down during and after menopause. Is this the word slowing down, phrase slowing down, a misnomer here? Number 2, how does this shift in hormonal balance impact metabolism? And number 3, what should women do to maintain a healthy weight during and after this phase of life? Some of that you've already touched on, but what would you say to Tracy?
Yeah, that's a great question. The hormonal balance is just so fascinating. It turns out that when you consume dairy, let's say, then you're still consuming some of the cow's hormones because the cows are being impregnated, so the estrogen levels are high. And if you consume milk and dairy, then you will be consuming some of the estrogens. Now, will it affect your body? Absolutely. The estrogens are the hormones that go straight to your cell nucleus and affect many, many genes in the cell nucleus. So if you go on a vegan diet and you cut out dairy from your diet, this will affect your hormone levels. There is a book published by Dr. Barnard that's called Your Body in Balance. And I would highly encourage that you read the book and see what you can do to support a healthy hormonal balance in your body. Briefly, going on a low-fat vegan diet helps with your hormonal balance. It helps with the weight management. Now, is it about slowing metabolism? Is slowing down the metabolism the right word? It's not only happening in women. It's also happening with men, right? Both men and women tend to gain weight as they age. Now, is it because of the age itself, or is it because of the diet they're on? It turns out that vegans, compared with people who are omnivores, who eat meat and dairy and eggs, will still gain some weight as they age, but the weight gain is much slower. And they're kind of like people on an omnivorous diet are gaining weight and vegans are gaining weight, but they have a lower BMI to start with. So they go in similar directions, but vegans at the end are much, much better off with lower body mass index. So it's mainly the diet that you're consuming. The aging process just highlights the importance of being intentional about your diet and about your exercise habits.
Thank you. Will said, does eating late at night, if legitimately hungry, negatively affect metabolism and weight? And if so, what can help me address my nighttime hunger?
Yeah, what a great question. And guess what? It's kind of a vicious cycle. You feel hungry at night and you eat, and then you don't feel hungry in the morning, so you don't eat anything. Then you eat a little bit for lunch, and then you're super hungry in the evening because you haven't eaten anything in the day. So my advice would be, okay, you're feeling hungry, but resist the temptation and don't eat anything tonight. Wait until the morning. Prepare all the foods for the morning and look forward to eating them. And you will be so hungry in the morning. You will be so looking forward to eating your breakfast. And that way you will break the cycle. You will eat a big breakfast, eat a moderate lunch, and you will not feel hungry in the evening.
Sounds good. Based on all that we're hearing. Yes, thank you. So any other words you would share with us as we near the end of our time together from this fascinating conversation?
I'd like to encourage everyone. I've worked with so many people who've almost given up on their weight loss journey because they've been disappointed many times. And I'd like to encourage you. If you're one of them, be assured that weight management is actually easier than you think. When you put the right fuel in your body, when you're just following the basic principles of being in tune with your body, then it's easier than you would think. So give it a try. Don't get discouraged when the going gets tough. Experiment with all the amazing recipes that are out there. It's much easier today than it was, several decades ago. When I went vegan, there were no recipes. I bought millet in a store and I didn't know what to do with it. I just knew it was healthy, but I didn't know how to prepare it. So today, you have so many resources and so many amazing foods that you can try out. So be patient with yourself, be creative, and give it a try. Go all the way in, and you will be rewarded richly.
Thank you so much. We've been talking with Dr. Hana Kahleova, MD, PhD, Director of Clinical Research at the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, and a research leader. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and for doing all this research and sharing it with us. What an honor it is to have the benefit of your insights. Thank you again.
Thanks so much for having me, Ocean.
When it comes to cancer, Alzheimer's, diabetes, heart disease, and other chronic illness, what really matters isn't how many books you read, how many webinars you attend, or how much you know. What really matters at the end of the day is what you eat and how you live. The science has given us what we need to know. Now it's time for action. It's time to implement and optimize your healthy lifestyle. It's time to get results. It's time to say goodbye to confusion and hello to clarity. It's time to say goodbye to bad habits and hello to good ones. It's time to fall in love with foods that love you back. It's time to join a community that will support you in achieving your goals. It's time for Whole Life Club.